To understand the Sea-Dweller, we must understand its purpose, where it positions itself in the Rolex family. So we will be looking at various models of the line and give it some kind of retrospective, because the development of the Sea-Dweller is quite fascinating in the family. It shows that Rolex is addressing these models with a bit more care, with a bit more thought about their development. Now, as most of us know, the Sea-Dweller is supposed to be the more competent Submariner. Where the Submariner could be considered the civilian model, the Sea-Dweller has that X factor. And that's what enthusiasts love. I'm sure civilians appreciate it too, but enthusiasts especially, hobbyists in this game, really enjoy that. This watch, like so many others in that time period, evolved out of necessity. Professionals needed these watches to go deeper, so Rolex obliged, collaborating with Comex and eventually creating models of their own. The reference 1665 was the first official Sea-Dweller, and really when you look at it at first, it looks like a Submariner. Certain variants had single lines of red text. The more common variant had twin red lines. The watch didn't have a Cyclops lens, which was a very characteristic element of the Sea-Dweller, and that was mainly because the crystal was domed, not flat, so it couldn't occupy a Cyclops lens. The only other real difference is that the case had a helium release valve. But really, seeing this side by side with a Submariner at the time, it's very difficult to notice a complete difference. The only real time you can tell is that you have to try them on and understand that one is much thicker than the other. We then moved to a more modern variant, which was the last hurrah of the aluminium bezel 40mm Sea-Dwellers, and that's the reference 16600. Very simple, extremely understated, and many people swear by them because they really are the epitome of that classic elegance that the reference 1665 had in spades. Now this watch especially looks even more like a Submariner. Again, the only real difference is when you look at it, you can see that it doesn't have a Cyclops lens. The watch has a much thicker case and deeper crystal. And one of the greatest appeals that this Sea-Dweller line has, these 5-digit references and these 4-digit references, is that they speak very much to the wearer in a way. It is an understated diving instrument in the purest sense. It looks just like a Submariner, but really under the hood, it isn't. That's one of the aspects of this watch that speaks to the enthusiast once again. It's very appealing because not many people know what it is on first impressions. Then we jump to one of the most interesting references that Rolex has made of their dive watches, and that is the Sea-Dweller 4000, which is the reference 116600, the official last hurrah of the 40mm Sea-Dweller. What they did so well with this was that they made it even more toned down than the Submariner, if that is even possible. The case design itself was tapered, not squared off like the Submariner, which had just adopted the super case at the time. All of the elements, you have a maxi dial, you have a fully graduated ceramic bezel. Very interesting, very simple. Still looks like a Submariner, but under the hood, it isn't. Once again, the only real way you could tell is when you're wearing the watch on the wrist and you notice that thickness. This watch only had a lifespan of about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, and is considered one of the most collectible Sea-Dwellers out there for that reason. And then we jump to the watch that has stirred a lot of debate. It has gotten my hackles up for sure. Lots of other enthusiasts don't know where to place this watch, but that is the new reference 126600, known as the Sea-Dweller 43. Now when this watch was released, we all had the same knee-jerk reaction. It's 43mm. It goes against what the original references were all about, being scaled down to 40 and remaining that size. It uses a lot more DNA from the James Cameron Deep Sea Sea-Dweller, but even still manages to somehow remain in that old school Sea-Dweller camp by doing a few things. One of the elements that is really perplexing about this watch is the single line of red text on the dial. Because Rolex isn't really one to dig deep and to go back into their archives to pull ideas back. For some reason they decided to incorporate a single red line on the dial, which is very unlike them when we see what they have been doing with regards to their material choices, their case designs, all the rest. So on one side you are appealing to the enthusiast. You're giving back some kind of reference to the original reference 1665. And then all of a sudden you incorporate a Cyclops lens. The element that really has been the defining feature of the Sea-Dweller is to be a watch without a Cyclops lens. So why do we have this conflict? It's almost as if they apologize for adding the Cyclops by incorporating the red line of text to the enthusiast. I don't know. It's very difficult to put together. But then on the same side, we can see that they are clearly focused to develop this line more and more. And what I hope you saw in these various pictures is that there has been such a clear evolution from the 1665 all the way to this latest reference. Yes, the size has changed. Yes, the materials have changed. Yes, they've gone back on their word a few times and added something that is quite out of the blue and strange. But you can see that there has been a development of these prototypes over time. The Sea-Dweller 43 shows something else about the name and about the family. It's quite a clear representation of what Rolex is planning on doing with their modern development of their pieces in many ways. We have little examples of references to the past, but still having that very dogmatic approach of sticking to what they know and what they think is best. So if we are then to refer back to what the Sea-Dweller was, why it was developed, what intention it really had behind the name, it simply was a submariner built with excess in mind, in the sense that it needed to go twice as deep. It needed to therefore be twice as imposing. And for that reason, the 43mm Sea-Dweller addresses it well. They have in fact stuck to that DNA. I'm sure most of us would agree that the watch would look quite appealing without a Cyclops lens. But in saying that, it is a watch designed for the civilian market nowadays. It's designed to be used as a daily wearer. So of course, the Cyclops makes the reading experience easier. Many of us question why the watch is 43mm and why Rolex has decided to continue to up the size and scale of their watches. On one side, it's because that's what the market demands. On the other side, going back to that idea of it being a more applicable tool for its purpose, being used underwater, it has a great amount of presence on the wrist. And what really has been so expertly done with this model in particular is the direction when looking at the proportions of the watch. The architecture on the dial, the use of the bezel being fully graduated, the size of the case, how the case tapers into the body of the watch, how the bracelet integrates with the case. Everything has been scaled appropriately to make the watch look all the more whole and complete. So where someone like me, who is quite reserved with the whole idea of this improvement and sort of going against what we would like to see, strictly speaking, when we look at the watch from a developmental point of view, we can understand this direction and this choice made. As ridiculous as it is that we say it's interesting that they decided to incorporate something like a Cyclops lens onto the crystal, what it shows is that the family, even though they know their history and where they've come from and their development, says something. That of course they're interested in further developing their line and looking back at their past at the same time, but that the family are also open to throwing a spanner in the works and going against what they did in the past. Which means that then we can open up our speculation towards where the Explorer line might go and where the Explorer 2 might actually receive a ceramic bezel, where we might see the likes of the Submariner receiving a complete overhaul. So as a case study, the Sea-Dweller and its development shows you where modern Rolex stands. Again, I'll emphasize, it's a very important point. And from this line, we can see the clear incremental improvements that have been made to make this watch all the more competent as a top-of-the-line diving instrument to be used by professionals and civilians on a daily basis.